Well, hello, everyone. This is John Byrne with Poets and Quants. I want to welcome you to what I think is going to be a really exciting session. We're talking about reimagining the MBA for the future of work. You know, you often find the most innovative approaches to business education in not at the Harvards and the Whartons and the Stanfords, but at schools that truly look at the market, are in touch with it, and want to make disruptive change. It's no different than in the corporate world, where you find incumbents often competing against new startups and mid-stage companies that are competing on the basis of new ideas. And in this seminar, we're going to talk about one of the newest ideas, one of the newest innovations in MBA education, with three folks who I think you're going to love at Northeastern University's DeMoore McKim School of Business. Let me introduce each of them, and then we'll talk about this incredible new innovation at the school and the school in general as well, for all of those who might be interested. So we have at the top of the screen, you can see Kate Klepper, who's Associate Dean of Graduate Programs. Welcome, Kate.
Thank you.
We have one of the professors at the school, Todd Alessandri, who's an Associate Professor of International Business and Strategy. Can't wait to talk to you, Todd. And Evelyn Tate, the Associate Dean of Recruitment and Admissions for graduate students at the school. Welcome, all of you.
Thank you.
So
Thank you.
I want to get right to what really excites me, which is a program you've just launched called MBAX. And what makes me really interested in this is the fact that, you know, business schools historically have stood at the periphery of university campuses. They've been generally isolated from all the other disciplines at a university. And what MBAX really is, at the core of it, is the opportunity to leverage a university's assets in total to deliver a better, more relevant education to students. And, you know, the fancy word for that is interdisciplinary, and we talk about that all the time. But the truth is that very few business schools have embraced the broader university in a way that really takes advantage of all that expertise in all the different schools and departments. And what MBAX does is get to the core of that. Todd, can you explain how that happens?
Sure. And to be honest, it was a process that didn't exist before. When we redesigned the full-time MBA curriculum back in 2018, 2019, we began to require interdisciplinary courses. And in order to do that, that required the task force and a lot of work from Kate to build bridges and strengthen the bridges we had across campus. And so a lot of it was really just getting in front of and working with faculty and deans from other colleges and discussing, here's what we would like to do, and can we cooperate in a way that helps us, but also helps you and helps your students and your faculty members. And so really it was a lot of relationship building, a lot of effort obviously behind it, but the goal was to get that different perspective, both for our students, but also for the students in the other colleges and schools on campus.
And let me just, point out to our audience that while that may seem like an obvious thing for someone to do, the incentive systems in universities overall tend to discourage it. Now, how come? Because if you go and you take courses in another department or school, you lose revenue. I mean, there is a real nuts and bolts answer for why there are institutional forces that prevent schools from collaborating with each other. So to be able to do that is not only a thoughtful and important development, but more importantly, it breaks down a lot of these institutional barriers that exist at every university that prevent some of this collaboration and innovation from happening. Kate, how did you do it? Did you break arms?
No arms were broken in this process. Mine either. They still work. But you're exactly right, John. And that is the biggest barrier. And I think that the truthful answer is it started at the top, right? It started with our dean, because when we went to our dean, Raji Chambati, who I know you know,
Yes.
and said, this is what we're thinking, and here's the revenue impact. To his credit, immediately his response was, this is fantastic. This is what we should be doing. This is the right thing to do. Let's do it. Let's see what happens. And so we did. And when I would approach my colleagues, as Todd mentioned, in the other colleges and schools on campus, and would approach them and say, this is what we would like. Could you help us identify a handful of courses that you offer at the graduate level that would be appropriate for non-majors? So computer science, what can non-computer scientists take here that would be they could be successful, that would add to their academic program? Our faculty would vet them, and we came up with a list. But the first response to each time I made this approach was, but you realize we're going to keep the revenue, right? You remember that this is how our system is. You're willing to give that? We said, yes, this is the right thing to do for the students. We believe this will make a stronger program, stronger students, more appealing to our corporate partners at the time of graduation, and it will become a self-fulfilling virtual cycle. And here we go. So yeah, it's been exciting.
And give us a sense for some of the combinations that you're putting forth.
For the so we have two different ways to look at it. Right? We have the interdisciplinary courses that everyone is required to do a minimum of 2, and then that grew into a full concentration. So every student in our full-time MBA program has 2 concentrations, any 2 business concentrations, or they can elect to do one outside the business school. So there are, I think, 4 options with computer science, from software to cybersecurity, data systems. We have in College of Social Science and Humanities, biotech, bioinformatics. We just launched a brand new information ethics. We've got arts, media, and design. We have game design. So students can actually mix and match however they choose. So you can imagine somebody who's interested in global supply chain studying supply chain and cybersecurity, right? Now, as you think about moving things like, vaccines around the world, you want to be sure that that's actually a very secure global process. And those 2 things combined. You can imagine finance and artificial intelligence, game design and business analytics. And it's really almost limitless when you think about the different permutations, because you add the extra layer of our students' undergraduate preparation. So whatever they've done prior to joining us at school and at work, and then coupled with this. So I get pretty excited about it.
Plus, it's an acknowledgement of the importance of technology and its ubiquitous role in all that we do today.
That's right.
Which is an important piece of the puzzle, because I've long maintained that if you want to look for one key weakness of most MBA programs, it's not globalization. It is, in fact, the lack of attention devoted to how technology has changed our personal and professional lives in every possible way. And so, diving deep into the impact of technology on the workplace and the future of work, and how artificial intelligence, machine learning are going to play out over the next quarter of a century, is essential to the preparation of graduates for that workplace. I mean, the other important piece of this is the acknowledgement that data science, what we've now call data analytics, business analytics, is all encompassing, because that technology has put into the hands of executives making decisions overwhelming amounts of data that, frankly, is unusable for smart decision making unless you learn how to harness it and make good use of it. And I think that's a really important part of MBAX as well. Now, Evelyn, are you looking for different kinds of students for this new MBA than you would for your traditional MBA?
We are looking for students who are certainly very motivated and very interested. I think that they should have some idea of what the workplace is going to require. And they should be able to appreciate what we're offering. So is this for every single person? Well, I'd like to think that it is, but it probably isn't. But certainly people who have an understanding and an appreciation for technology and its place in society, or is willing to learn that. It is also a program for people who do have some experience with, in areas such as computer science, such as data analytics, who are looking to further develop their skills and further develop their management and their leadership skills in order to take those very important roles years from now.
That's great, and that makes total sense to me. And given the deep dive that you're going to take with your MBA in these subject areas, I would think you need to have some passion, in addition to maybe some experience, maybe not all the experience, but you got to have a lot of passion for that.
Definitely have to have passion.
Yeah, totally. Now, how do you connect the dots? Because, okay, you have students going off to these other departments or schools at the university and then coming back to you. How does that get all interwoven with each other? Todd?
I think that the first part of that really involves a lot of work by our staff, who really help to craft coursework and curricula for each student's case and each student's background. And so there's a lot of preparation behind the scenes. But when it comes to melding that in the classroom, Northeastern's approach is always blending theory and practice. And what we're doing now is bringing in different types of theories and different types of practice. And it really ends up enriching the classroom because you have these new perspectives coming in. And we're not just talking about new perspectives in the business school, but new perspectives from outside the business school, asking very interesting questions. And so personally, from teaching in the classroom, we see some really lively discussions because we're coming at it from different perspectives, and the things that the students may offer as recommendations may then get shot down by their peers saying, wait, you're not thinking about it from the cybersecurity perspective, and that would never work. And we end up crafting stronger discussions and stronger resolutions in the end. So even the students that don't get that do not pursue an MBAX, they're getting some benefit from it, from seeing these different perspectives, which it's been fascinating to be a part of.
Right, because you're increasing the diversity of the class in a deeper way than we might otherwise think. Because I think when learning is fresh, just like when work is fresh, it immediately gets poured into the classroom.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think the other important thing to remember is that these students then go out on corporate residency in lots of different industries and lots of different fields. And they're bringing back not only what they've gotten in the classroom outside of the business school, but what they've gotten at the workplace. And they bring those perspectives back that make it even richer, even deeper, and probably even a more lively, I like the word lively for the conversation, but that's where the passion comes in, and you're in that classroom in the case discussions.
And just give me the nuts and bolts of the program. It starts when, it ends when. Do you have a co-op, which is a signature piece of the Northeastern University experience?
So their first semester on campus, they will take our core, which we redesigned, and it's really only one semester, very intense. And so the entire cohort of students is in that core for the fall.
You're working them hard there, I know.
Oh, they usually end up very tired at the end of the semester.
And your core is obviously the business basics. It's finance, it's accounting, it's marketing, it's strategy, right?
It is, and because it's such a short core, we really work to coordinate across the classes to maximize the benefit to the students.
Now, Todd, you teach in the core?
I teach the strategy course in the core.
So how did you have to change your strategy course to adapt to the new program?
It forced us to really ask, since we're looking at shorter courses, what absolutely is foundational to strategy? What does every MBA student have to have before we can send them out on residency? And we asked that question for all the core courses. And so we took what was maybe I don't know, 15 weeks of work and brought it down to about 8 weeks of work and really stripped it down to the most fundamental pieces. But we also talked a lot about where is there overlap between the courses and who should teach that piece of the overlap, which then forced all of us to be more efficient, but also to be more coordinated.
So you get a better sense of the integration between and among the disciplines.
Right. And we have a lot of discussions about sharing cases, sharing ideas, concepts, and coordinating our schedules. So for example, when I teach a case that involves a net present value analysis, I made sure that the finance professor has already covered that. And so I'm then reinforcing his work.
Now, how hard was it to squeeze 15 weeks of strategy teaching into 8?
It was very difficult. And my department, when I went back to my department to discuss, we had a lot of debate about what's truly critical. And that really was a difficult discussion across all our, what we call groups here at Northeastern. It was a really difficult discussion, and there were some heated arguments, as you can imagine.
Yeah, every professor is very protective of their discipline and their courses.
It was, but there's also, it gave us an opportunity to see where there was a lot of synergy.
Yeah.
And so we were able to leverage those synergies to help take some of that material out. So for example, some of the material I teach was similar to what was being taught in entrepreneurship, in our entrepreneurship and innovation class in the core curriculum. And so I worked with that professor to say, okay, I'll teach this part and you take that part, and very intentional design.
Now, I imagine there were parts that you gave up that were really hard for you, right?
Of course. And particularly.
Yeah. At the end of the day, you probably had to admit that, you know what, this could be taught more efficiently.
More efficient, or it could be taught in a follow-on elective.
Right,
and
exactly.
what it did is it allowed us to move more things to electives, which opened up the electives that previously didn't exist.
Really good point. Yeah.
Which
So
then,
and after the core, what happens?
so in the spring, that's where everything starts. So from the spring, their first classes in the spring, they take usually the first foundational concentration course for their 2 concentrations. So that's 2 out of the 5 courses they will take. And then the other 3 are either electives, or we encourage them to start the interdisciplinary courses during that first semester to immediately bring that perspective and prepare them for their residency. And the other aspect of the program that we changed in the curriculum redesign is we require experiential learning credits. And so one of the other things we encourage them to do during that spring semester is to work and to take a course that counts for experiential learning. So for example, we have a global consulting project course where we actually work with live corporate partners on live projects, and that counts for their experiential learning credits. Right. So they're immediately diving into experiential and interdisciplinary, the 2 hallmarks of this new program and of the MBAX right away.
Great, that's great.
And then they go on their residency.
And is it residency essentially the co-op experience?
Yes.
And how long does that last?
So there are 3 different options. For most students, it's the tried and true Northeastern 6-month residency for the vast majority. If we have students coming in with a lot of business experience, they may opt for a more traditional MBA 3-month, more internship type position, but that's really reserved for students who have a lot of experience. But most are taking the 6-month option, and that really gets them beyond your traditional internship, where they're taking on project ownerships and real responsibility. And then approximately 1/3 of the students opt for a second residency and end up taking 12 months to do a residency and really get some deep experience.
So it's almost a little bit like med school.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
A little shorter, but a similar concept where you get to practice what you've learned in the classroom in a real world environment. And I'm imagining that a fairly significant percentage of those people then land full-time jobs with those companies.
It's true. We see that there's a fairly high percentage of our students who at least receive an offer in that company, and whether they pursue that opportunity or decide to leverage that elsewhere depends on obviously the individual student and the circumstances. But we do see that, like our undergraduate experience, there is a pretty high internship, residency to offer correlation.
And how long is the entire program, MBAX?
The MBA, well, depending on which option you choose, right? You can do it in your traditional academic 2-year and start in September, graduate 2 years later in May. Most of our students, as Todd said, will opt for the 6-month residency, which makes it a 24-month program. And then anyone who chooses the second cycle of residency would graduate the following December. So our largest graduating cohort is typically in August completion, start in September and 2 years later in August.
Right, that's great, cool. And now the big difference between MBAX and your other MBA program, your full-time MBA program, is essentially the interdisciplinary part. And is there actually more experiential learning in it as well?
There's the potential for more experiential learning in the sense that the students are required to take 3 credits. They can pursue up to 6. But I think what the difference is really the nature of that experiential learning, where they are more likely to pursue some of that experiential learning outside of the business school. And to pursue opportunities that, for example, maybe in our incubator where they're working with on a startup with a computer science group. So there is a more likely that they're going to have some different experiences, which helps round out that interdisciplinary perspective.
I think it's also worth pointing out that this is not something that, the mad scientists went into a lab and created. You went out and you spoke to 400 different hiring managers of MBAs,
right?
And you sought their opinions about what they're really looking for in the future of work. And out of those discussions came this program, right?
That's exactly right. And speaking to the employers, I remember Todd had a lot of these conversations in that curriculum design. And what we were hearing is employers would say, hey, you're doing a good job teaching these students all the business that they need to know. And that's fine. You don't need to fix that per se. But really what we need is when our business students are sitting next to computer scientists or next to game designers or next to bench scientists in the pharma companies, they have no sense of what that work is, what that world is, and how these people think and work. It would be great if we could figure out before they show up at work how to work together, how to have that appreciation of what the other side of the house is doing. We came back and thought, okay, how do you do that? we can't start hiring biologists to teach bench science, but we have some really world-class biology faculty 2 buildings down. Maybe there's something in there that we can leverage.
Yeah, a brilliant insight.
Don Burns.
When you realize it now, that's fantastic. Now let's step back and talk a little bit more about the business school and what makes it unique. I mean, for one thing, let's state the obvious. You are in one of the most exciting, dynamic American cities, Boston. It's a city where there are a lot of young people going to university.
Yes.
And it's a fun place to be. I'm just going to tell you, okay? Now, I've never lived in Boston, but I have worked in Boston, and I love the city. And I love how easy it is to navigate the place. And I love the parks, the commons, just the history, the restaurants. It's a magnificent place to go to school. So I'm going to start here with the obvious because I know that and I can speak to it. But what I don't know then is how your school is differentiated in that marketplace. So tell me what makes it unique.
Who wants to
I think one of
Go ahead, Evelyn.
I've worked here for a number of years, and I think that certainly one of the things that makes Northeastern unique is its heritage. Always finding ways to help students to earn their education and to be able to afford to do that. I mean, that really is a part of Northeastern's heritage. And to see how this institution has, gone from that point to now where, when you even look at the undergraduate institution, it is so much in demand. And there are students, families all over who recognize the value of integrating that experiential part with the academic, intellectual part. And I think that is certainly one of the things that has made Northeastern unique. And, I could go on and on about the sense of community that's here as well. I think that there's a strong sense of community here. And I think that has been especially exhibited in this last year as we have dealt with the pandemic. We still have a lot of students who are here because of a lot of the guidelines that the university had set up.
Right.
I would add another huge factor is really, and this started at the very beginning, as Evelyn alluded to, it's keeping the student at the center of everything that we do. Yes, we have world-class faculty who are creating knowledge and they're doing amazing things and are leaders in their field. And that is critically important to the enterprise. But the decisions that we make on a programmatic and a campus level are with the student at the center. And that is the building of the labs. That's the interdisciplinary nature and saying, you know what, we're going to give up this revenue because it's the right thing to do for the student. And couple that with this very deep, long, 100-year-old history of partnering with our corporate partners and making them a part of our design and build strategy. We don't build it and then say, here, look what we have. Aren't we fabulous? Yes, we are. But really, this is what we're thinking. Let us test our hypothesis. What is it that you know, and get that market-driven information to then design the programs to feed, their needs. And again, to your point, to the future of work. And I think that's a very unusual and unique perspective and factor that exists here and probably not too many other places.
You often hear deans, more than professors, frankly, speak about theory is good, but only when it meets practice. But here, the actual design of your program backs that up. There's through every business program you have, the academics meet the practical. And I think, a lot of us talk about how important higher education is for social mobility. I think that is an important aspect of the Northeastern experience because, you're not always taking in highly educated, wealthy people. You're taking in people and really adding to their ability to play in this very competitive world and increasing their ability to move up the ladder of success. And I'm not only talking about, having a job that you like or you love or having more income than someone else. I'm talking about your personal fulfillment. Right. And living a life of multiple dimensions and enjoying that life to the fullest. And I think that's a really important part, the social mobility part that the school provides so many of its graduates. So in talking to 400 different companies about MBAX, what did you learn about what they really believe to be the needs and the expectations of the next generation of professionals in their workplaces?
I think a lot of that comes down to thinking about problems and opportunities in different ways. And I think that the traditional general MBA mindset is almost linear in nature. And I think actually Elon Musk's comments in recent about how too many MBAs in the boardroom, I think that kind of highlights that linear nature. And I think what our corporate partners were telling us was we want people who are going to, one, think differently, but two, also not be afraid to take some risk, try different things to pursue opportunities that maybe don't look promising or as promising originally, but with a little bit of cultivation become much more promising. And I think that spirit is really what we tried to do in the program, is to allow people the flexibility to try different things and to try different coursework, different paths of coursework, maybe try different residencies, and take those risks and to maybe work with our startup incubator and try some things out. And that's what we learned is really important, is the a lot of the MBAs are really intelligent, and that's across the board at any school. But it's what you do with that intelligence, and it's that willingness to take risks and try something different, and maybe not offer the same solution as the 400 other MBAs that you're interviewing against.
Right. You know, in a way, it seems to me like the bar has gone up. The MBA is traditionally your general management degree. It's not a specialized degree in that sense, although obviously through elective coursework, you can specialize to some level of expertise. So if you're going into finance, you're going to take more finance courses. And if you're going into human resources, you're going to take more OB courses. Marketing, same thing. But it seems that the marketplace is increasingly demanding both a general management knowledge of the basics, but also a deeper expertise in a specific area. And that's what MBAX seems to be doing too.
It does provide that sort of T approach where you have some breadth in the general manager perspective. And we get a lot of that through the foundational courses, but then you get that depth. And I think what the MBAX does is it allows that depth in unique areas that, that look different. Our students are going to look a bit different when they have an information ethics paired with, say, a finance concentration. They're going to look and think very differently than your traditional finance MBA.
Right. And at the same time, of course, you're not turning your back on the traditional full-time MBA at all. And I would guess that your innovation here is even informing your full-time MBA, your traditional MBA. Is that right?
It is, and you see some great discussions in the classroom. I'll answer from the classroom perspective. You see some great interactions and some great perspective building going on where students see things they wouldn't have seen without that diversity.
Right. So tell me how the full-time program is basically preparing learners for the new world of work.
Kate, you want me to go, or you want to take?
I'll start. Yeah, I mean, I'm looking across to see if I want to jump on anybody's words. I think the full-time program, and again, where we are pushing hard for students to venture into interdisciplinary study and taking a couple of courses at least outside what they maybe thought they were signing up for if they hadn't read carefully, right? So it's not going to be all finance and marketing and or behavior and strategy, but really to force that a little further. Those two things combined, and again, I go back to depending on what they did prior to enrolling, we may have people say, you know what, I studied computer science. I don't really need that, but I'm kind of interested in how to take those very technical skills and do a deep dive in finance. So maybe finance and analytics, business analytics combined with my computer science undergrad will position me for where I want to go. So a lot of our conversations are really about understanding what the employer is seeking when it comes time to hire, and then working, as Todd said, we've got a phenomenal staff of advisors, both academic advisors and our career advisors, who work very closely together to say, these are the things we're hearing from the employers on a daily basis, a regular basis, and being able to help students position themselves to be a candidate for those roles, to really stand out as someone who has something different and something special. Prior to our curriculum revision, students had a single area of concentration, which is sort of the norm, and they would come out with one thing, but the world wasn't in a single concentration position anymore. And I think we're setting our students up for much more success because they have agility of thought, they're nimble, they're learners, they're understanding that this is a lifelong proposition. The world is going to continue to change, and change is only going to happen faster than it's ever happened in the past. There is no tapping of the brakes, right? This is a one pedal machine. It's accelerator or accelerator, you choose. And I think the more we can help our students set themselves up for an entire future of learning and reimagining themselves and gaining new skills as the world changes, then the more successful they'll be.
And do you have a corporate residency in the full-time MBA program, the traditional one?
Yes.
Okay. Mm-hmm. Right. Now, Evelyn, are you looking for different kinds of students for that traditional MBA program?
We're looking for students who they may not be quite ready for the MBAX yet. And that still encompasses a large group of students from all different kinds of persuasions, all different kinds of backgrounds. I think what's still really important is that we try to figure out from the admissions perspective, what it is that the candidate is interested in, what are his or her or their goals, 5 years, 10 years down the road, and then, how do they see this MBA program, whether it is the traditional full-time MBA program or whether it is MBAX, is going to help them. We have actually been able to sort of talk to a couple of candidates who may not have been initially interested in MBAX, but through something in their application, maybe some kind of exposure to some area of computer science academically, or maybe the work that they've been doing, we thought that they might be a good candidate. And we don't make those decisions by ourselves. We actually do work with the College of Computer Science to make those decisions on candidates for the MBAX, because it's important for us to get their input. But when it comes to the candidates for the full-time MBA program, we still want them to be forward-looking. I think that that's important because, as Kate just said, the one thing that we can bank on is that things are going to change, and they will always change. And so it is important for us to prepare students, regardless of whether they're going to pursue MBAX or the full-time MBA program, to be ready for that, and to expect that things are going to be changing, and to be prepared for that. And I think that the full-time MBA curriculum does do that as well. I don't find that it's just so very static. I think it is very forward-looking.
And what's the class profile generally look like? I mean, how many years of work experience are you looking for? What's the breakdown, gender breakdown, the international breakdown, that kind of thing?
So typically, our students will have around, let's say, 4 years of postgraduate work experience, and that really is, we're looking at the mean there. Most of our students will come to us with 2 years of experience and up, let's say, somewhere around 7 or 8 years of experience. So the outliers are going to be, the 9 and the 10 years of experience.
Sure.
And then at the lower end, we actually have we have admitted some candidates, a small number of candidates who've come to us directly from undergraduate. And they are people who have done very, very well academically. So they performed well academically, but a lot of times they have also completed some very strong co-ops, or they've had some very strong internships if they're not coming from Northeastern. So they have had some experience in working. It may not be their traditional 2 and 3 years of postgraduate work. In terms of our male to female ratio, and so now we're at the point where we need to even be more broad, right? Because there are people who will identify as being neither male nor female or differently. And we're seeing a small number of those students who are either choosing to not to identify, or they identify differently. But for now, and I'm proud to say that, Northeastern and the DeMoore McKim School of Business has always had a very strong complement of women in our programs. And I've been here for a few years, several years now. So currently we are at around 40% women in our full-time MBA program, which includes the MBAX. And then in terms of our international population, we are at about 36% international, coming from several countries.
Yeah, that's great. Now, we're already getting questions, and maybe I'll turn to a few of those, and we'll go kind of in and out. This is an obvious question, and I think an important one. Is the new MBAX program a STEM designated program?
It is not. And I know that may be unfortunate news to some who are listening and asking. There are other programs in the business school that are STEM designated. At this time, our MBA is not. We are looking at how we might be able to change that. But I don't want to give any false marketing here. At this time, it's not.
I would agree with Kate if I could just add something, and that is that Todd and Kate have both spoken about the potential for students to work more than one corporate residency. So while this is not a guarantee, it's not a promise or anything like that, but I know that there have been a few of our students who have been able to, even our international students who've been able to work, more than one corporate residency. So they may not still be getting the total 36 months on OPT as students are interested. This still may provide them with an option to get a little bit more experience.
Right.
Now, here's a good question from Neil. Can you tell us more about what you discovered in your discussions with hiring managers? What other deficiencies did they find in traditional MBAs?
During that redesign process, I spoke with a lot of our corporate partners. And I think aside from getting out of the business school perspective, I think the other thing that really, there were two additional things that they wanted us to work on or better develop, and not necessarily that our students were, say, deficient, but things that they just want us to be, everybody to be better at. One was critical thinking. And not necessarily just critical thinking, breaking down a problem, but also being able to make judgments with less than perfect information, we'll call it. And so making those tough decisions, knowing when to take the next step, even if we don't have all the information we need. So
Right.
that was one. And then the other one is an obvious one with recent changes in the business world and the world in general, is the increasing need for understanding basic data analytics, so that you can at least have that conversation so you know what analytics can and cannot do, rather than just saying, oh, we'll use analytics. Well, you have to be able to make sure the coding can actually be done and answer that problem. And so those were two things that came out, and that led to us, again, in our curriculum discussions, trying to find ways to strengthen those two things, not just within one course, but across multiple courses.
Right. So you were embedding some of these principles throughout the curriculum. Yeah.
Right.
Now, Neil must have journalistic instincts, because he's asked a follow-up question, which I find to be really good. What really surprised you in your conversations with these managers? Was there something that you didn't expect? Because a lot of what you said, I would have expected. You probably did too. Was there something that was like, whoa, that's really surprising?
I think I don't want to say it was a surprise, because I think as part of Northeastern, I'm in constant contact with our corporate partners as follow-ups from residencies occur, and we learn what went well and what didn't go so well. So I wasn't terribly surprised, but I think the number of people who said we really want interdisciplinary, and not just sort of basic interdisciplinary. We want some people, for example, to go and take a course or courses, plural, in areas that are completely different. So philosophy, right? I remember talking to one corporate partner who said, I would love if your MBA students all had a course in philosophy. And I remember asking him, I said, I need to know more why philosophy. And really it was about just looking at things in very different ways to try and come to an answer from a completely different perspective than what you're sitting in, and the ability to almost have the dual mindset, which is, again, hard to do.
And although we didn't add a philosophy course,
Yes,
if we included everything that everyone had asked for, it would be a 27-year MBA program. But we had to have some reality barriers and guideposts. But I think, Todd, if you want to talk a little bit about the social impact of business course
Right.
that we've added, which is a really exciting and interesting team taught. And I think this also came from employers as
Right.
well as from prospective students saying, business, but how about business for good? And what does that mean? And how can we be a force of good? And we responded to that with this really, really great new course that has now just completed its second iteration. Todd, if you want to get more detail on that.
And again, this was one where we broke down traditional barriers. As a faculty member, I like to have my course that I teach and have control of. And this course is completely the opposite. It's one course that is, I'll call it, managed by a faculty member whose basic sole responsibility is to bring in other experts from within the business school and outside, who can talk about the various elements of social impact and how business impacts society and how society can impact business. And again, connect the business to practice. And that came from our corporate partners, but that one even came stronger from our students when we asked students in the redesign a little bit about why Northeastern and why did you choose other schools versus Northeastern. There were some folks who really felt like we could strengthen our corporate social responsibility aspects of our program, for example. And so that led to this course, and ultimately we're working on developing a social responsibility concentration that is in the works, again, to appeal to not only those students, but to those corporate partners who really want that perspective.
Yeah. And I think that answers to a great extent some of the criticism that's been levied at schools for teaching the so-called shareholder model of management. I don't really think that schools went all on that model, but to the extent that we're understanding that there is a greater appreciation for all the stakeholders, the customers, the community, the suppliers, the employees, of course, that's being more emphasized than ever in MBA curricula. And this is a really good step to make people understand that your decisions have consequence, and the consequence can be fairly significant for people. We have a question from Larry. This touches a little upon how we opened our session today. Let me quote him. Academic institutions suffer from a not invented here mentality that limits their ability to form partnerships with innovative external community-based partners. How does Northeastern overcome this impediment? Good question, because this goes to the heart of your co-op program as well, because I imagine that outreach imposes a level of connection with the community and the world of work that very, very few schools actually have, because you're organizing all this. I can only imagine the logistics involved in doing so many co-ops for so many students from undergrad to grad. So how did you overcome the impediment of partnering not only with other departments and colleges at your university, but also with external partners?
That goes back to why, what makes Northeastern unique. Because the university really started this from day one. So I don't believe that we ever had an impediment that we had to overcome, but there have been really since Northeastern's founding, students who have been working and going to school, and over years, the university has evolved to accommodate that, but also to get out in front of that and actually come to provide students with opportunities for working, while they are earning their degrees. And it continues now. I think when I look at the institution, we have a whole team of people who work to support students' efforts to find co-ops at the undergraduate level. We have a really dynamic graduate career center within DeMoore McKim. They work with our students. I'm always, talking to our professors, like Todd and other faculty and Kate, about what's happening. Our dean is really great about bringing us all together to keep us all informed, so that we, in the end, can provide the best service possible to our students. All the way up to President Daoun. I just don't see that we have ever had an impediment, but it's always been a really just a part of what Northeastern is.
Yeah, and it requires a massive investment. In any given year, how many co-op partners do you have at both the undergraduate and the graduate level? Do you have an idea?
I don't. If you go across the whole institution, I don't even have an idea. I would have to say there have to be thousands.
Right.
It has thousands. But I think the other thing that we have to create it here mindset is the depth of the engagement with our corporate partners. They're not simply brought on campus to interview students and hire them. They are part of our curriculum redesign. The dean has an advisory board of corporate partners. And when we're introducing new courses like this global consulting project, we go to these employer partners and say, this is what we're thinking. Help us vet this idea to a place where you would be willing to partner with us and be part of it and provide a learning opportunity. We bring practitioners in not only as guest speakers, but as, the head of a course. They'll deliver courses in their area of expertise. So I think it's a true issue in lots of places, but to Evelyn's point, because from the very beginning of our existence, it has been a partnership in educating. It's a little bit, it's different here.
Right.
And I would, if I could just add 1 second, John, the other thing is, I think in addition to that investment you're talking about, there's a culture. And, a good example is when we went to do the MBA redesign, the charge from our Dean Eachenbody was, look, he wanted us to be innovative, and he sat me down and said, nothing is sacred. Don't worry about that not invented here syndrome. If we think it's a good idea, if you think it's a good idea with the task force, let's make it work. And that's what attracted me to Northeastern 12 years ago, is that entrepreneurial spirit, where if we can show that there's an opportunity that is relevant and needed, we'll find a way to make it happen, even if it's not traditional. And that whole discussion about breaking down interdisciplinary barriers is a perfect example. There is no structure that existed. We actually had to break down some structures, and we were encouraged rather than discouraged.
I love that phrase. Nothing is sacred. I think that's at the centerpiece of any innovative organization, because everyone who tries to innovate, no matter where you are, even in your personal life, let's face it, you're going to hit barriers, and you're going to hit hurdles, and you're going to have to overcome. And just the notion that nothing is sacred kind of liberates you, frees you, gives you a blank piece of paper to invent. Now, we have a question from Lila, who is from Toronto, Canada. This gets into some nitty gritty stuff, but it's an easily answered question. First, she says, and we should just, bathe ourselves in the compliment. She says, I'm very impressed by Northeastern's focus on employer feedback and shaping the MBA program, and specifically creating the MBAX program. How were you able to solicit feedback? Was it through an advisory council, surveys, or other means? You may be listening here to another administrator or dean from another school.
Yeah, that's okay. I would say it's all of the above. Right? We didn't pick one tact and stick with only that. We did go to the advisory council with our straw man, and then we went back to the drawing table. We invited employers to be part of the task force. We did the interviews. I think one of the very exciting and sort of surprising bits of input from where I sat is we decided we were going to survey students who were admitted to our program and chose not to enroll.
Right.
We thought, okay, you liked us enough to apply, but you chose someone else. That's fine, right? That's life. But why? What were we missing? And their feedback was interesting, but to me, what was most interesting was the response rate. These people owed us nothing. They were not part of our community. They were not alumni. We didn't know them from anybody walking down the street. And we had a pretty significant response rate to that survey, which told me that somewhere in their brain, Northeastern still mattered. So I felt good about that. And we took that input very, very seriously, along with all the other places that we were able to, our alumni, again, our employers, our board members. So it was as close to a 360, I think, as we could have gotten.
That's great. And that actually folds neatly into my wrap-up question for you. Okay, look, make the pitch. Tell me why I should get an MBA at the Moore McKim.
Do you want 3 answers? One for each of us?
Go ahead, Kate.
I said, I'm going to go back to something I said earlier, and I think we really do put the student or the learner at the center of everything we do. Our goal is to help prepare you for the future of work, whatever that future looks like. So if your plan is different than the plan of the student sitting next to you, that's great. That actually makes it better. We don't want everyone who thinks the same way and comes in with the same preparation. It's really about preparing students for the future of work. It's a digital world. We know that. We know it's coming. And even if you don't have that background, we're going to help set you up for success. That's our goal. Our goal is your success.
I like that. And I just want to say this too about your dean, Raj. I've had the pleasure of knowing him before he came to Northeastern. And I want everyone out there to know that you really have someone who believes in innovation, who's also has a reputation for it. He was the primary mover and shaker at the University of Illinois that brought forth their disruptive online MBA program. And it's no surprise to me that he uttered that wonderful phrase, "Nothing is sacred," in challenging the faculty and everyone else at the school to reinvent a new MBA, to take a look and do something dramatically different with MBAX. So, you know, you put an innovator in place and they can't help but keep pushing and pushing and pushing for more innovation. So I would expect that at Northeastern, more innovation is going to find its way in every single program that you do, because Raj won't stand for anything less.
I couldn't agree with you more, John.
Yeah, exactly.
And I look forward to the next conversation with the next innovation.
Indeed, indeed. Well, listen, thank you so much. I really appreciated it. I loved our conversation. Evelyn, Todd, Kate, it was a true pleasure for me. And I hope everyone out there learned a lot about not only MBAX, but the full-time traditional MBA program, and sort of the culture and the distinctive features of what makes the Moore McKim special. Thank you.
Thank you, John.
Thank you.
Thank you.
You have a wonderful day. Thanks everybody out there for watching. This is John Byrne with Poets and Quants.